So the new area of space and how data drives decisions. This was an interesting work in progress one. It was originally changed names a couple times, but we finally established that this was a better name for this session. I first really want to thank the platinum sponsors up here. They are so important to everything that we do here at CommsV Next. So a little bit about me. I am a senior technical alliances specialist at Logitech. If you've ever bought a Logitech Nook or Windows Compute, that's me behind it. A lot of PowerShell. I love PowerShell. I live in San Jose, California. I have 18-year-old twins who are off to college in 4 months, so finally, empty nester, woo! I used to do competition barbecue. Now I mostly teach for fundraisers, so you can chat about barbecue all day with me, and I'll keep going forever. I am highly involved in scouting thanks to my son. I am a district roundtable commissioner and a commissioner. I'm also a member of the OA for scouting, and I'll be at the National Jamboree. And for those who watch the Christmas light fight type shows, I am way too deep into that, both financially and time-wise.
Hi, my name is Vidas Kasniunas. I'm the VP of Strategic Accounts and Partnerships at Utelogy. Unlike Adam, who is technically smart and capable, I am not. I'm all about sales. I live in Wilmette, Illinois, which is on Chicago's North Shore. I have a 13-year-old 8th grader, where Adam was an ex-barbecue champion. I am an ex-vagabond liveaboard sailor, having spent a couple of years in a previous life traveling around on a boat. And I continue to be way too deep into water sports of any and every kind.
You know, if you ever want to get tired of that Lake Michigan stuff, that choppy, come see me. We'll go on a nice flat California lake. We'll have some good times.
All right. Our agenda today. We are going to start with a little talk about the basics. We'll get into the evolution through change and planning for what's next, followed by talking about collaboration intelligence and the modern toolkit. But before we get into all of that, we are going to do a little survey with our little group here throughout the presentation. On a scale of 1, 2, or 3, where 1 is considered to be a legacy organization that is old-fashioned or technologically conservative with separate and isolated AV networks, separate AV teams, separate AV support operations, and typically meaning separate from IT. So that's 1. 3 is the opposite, right? Considered to be a very modern, technologically progressive, highly advanced organization with all collaboration technology devices on the corporate network, with AV support operations that are integrated into the broader ITSM and ITIL frameworks. And then 2 being somewhere in between. How many work for a number 3 modern, technologically progressive organization? Okay, that's 1 out of what? 2, 4, 6, 7. 1 out of 7. All right, and then how many are at the other end? At a number 1, a conservative, technologically conservative organization. All right, and I guess everyone else is in between.
Right? You're all in between there somewhere? All right. Yeah, most people probably, yeah.
Okay. How many of you have simple up-down monitoring on some of your devices in some of your collaboration spaces? 3. Okay. And then how many have simple up-down monitoring on all of your devices and all of your spaces? All right.
All
All right. The basics. Is it alive? Right? At the heart of it, this is the most important thing. Or is it? Think of it this way. If you live in a dark cave with no light, you don't know what you can't see. But if you have light and you can see suddenly, right, then you want to know a whole lot more about what you're actually looking at. So the first most important thing to know is a room alive or not, right? But that only tells part of the story. Once you know if it's dead, for example, you want to know how and why it died. Or if it's alive, you want to know how healthy is it? How is it being used? And much more.
So that's a great start. But really, we start with health, right? Simple up or down. And maybe if you're lucky, you have some level of integrations and you kind of know what's about to happen. And conference rooms are really designed back in the day for that executive staff, right? Not everybody had conference rooms, and those who did, it was a hassle to maintain. It was very specific. You didn't have a lot of options, and it cost a lot of money. So along came, OCS, then Link, then Skype for Business, and now Teams. And Microsoft really became a point of now we have that ability to put that into every room. It wasn't expensive hardware. You could buy almost off the shelf equipment, and you didn't need anything special to actually run it. You can buy a standard webcam. You can buy for those who remember, BCC 950. It became a much easier setup to do. But what we really wanted was just easy deployments, right? We want to make this easy to put out there and make it accessible for all for a cost-efficient purpose, right? That's what everybody wants, easy, cost-efficient. So the simple metrics, right, is where we started. Years ago, our focus was on the binary, up, down, right? Is it there? Is it not? Is it alive? Is it working? And most of the time, we just had to wait for people to tell us. Now, this was useful for maintenance, but it doesn't tell a story. It didn't give us the budget to go update. It just said it's up, down, and we'd be yelled at, say, why is it not working? You have to go fix it. But you never had those resources to go and say, this is how we're going to do it. And all we really paid attention to, again, was these executive boardrooms. That had the lion's share. Maybe you had a few other people who were starting to adopt new technologies. So let's look at evolving through challenges. And most of you can probably figure out what this is going to go. So simple up and down is okay, but that doesn't grow. And spaces need to evolve to the new way of working. So we all remember, hopefully remember some pre-COVID era stuff. Working remotely was great, but that wasn't the norm. Only few people were allowed to do that. We were more, and still are, more impactful in person than we are online. And spaces and people were not tightly integrated. There were buildings and there were people, and there were two separate entities. But again, meeting rooms were still few and far between. They weren't first of mind. So this happened. right? Our favorite thing in the world. This one event single-handedly changed how meeting rooms changed into spaces. While it's just a word, we went from meeting rooms to collaboration spaces, where conversations became more important and the meeting room itself was no longer the criteria. It was how do we work together? So this drove the biggest turning point in conference rooms and meeting spaces and collaboration spaces, right? We had to make sure that all these spaces were healthy, they were available, and they met the needs of what people wanted, right? So companies had to support home, and people got used to having to work from anywhere. IT had to support that. So many companies decided during the pandemic that they needed to plan ahead. Companies who thought through this took that time and said, hey, we're going to shut down the company. Nobody's here. We're going to do upgrades and we're going to plan for the future, right? That way, when people started to come back, their rooms were up and running and they didn't have to take everything offline after the fact. And that is where we first started to see people counting, right? It was during COVID. It was about how many people were in a space at a given time so we could know whether it was overutilized or underutilized. So what did COVID leave us with, right? Besides some horrible memories, one of the biggest changes was how we just thought about work, that it's collaboration. It's not a meeting room, it's a collaboration. That rooms had to be simple and easy to get into and use and join. That IT can manage anything from anywhere at any time. This was not a massive boots on the ground, that devices had to be remote managed. That people fluctuated from where they worked, home or office, and they had to have the same experience across that. They were used to having a work at home experience of that easy to use join. And lastly, it all just had to be easy to understand with intellectual data that you can actually drive information from. It was no longer just up, down, but now how is this whole space being utilized?
Okay. Before we get into planning for what's next, let's continue our little survey. So we're up to question number 4. How many of you have proactive alerting beyond simple up-down enabled on some of your devices and some of your spaces? Okay. And then how many of you have proactive alerting enabled on all of your space, all of your devices and all of your spaces? Okay. How many of you have alerting integrated with a ticketing or ITSM system? Okay. How many of you have remote management capabilities for some of your devices in some of your spaces?
2 of you, 3 of you, 4 of you.
And then how many of you have remote management on all of your devices and all of your spaces? All right. All right. If you have an analytics and reporting layer that works alongside real-time monitoring, you can provide a complete collaborative intelligence platform. Monitoring answers what's wrong now. Analytics answers what should we change going forward. Together, they enable organizations to move from reactive fixing what's broken to proactive continuous improvement.
But you cannot rely just on the counting of people alone. There are other connected devices in your spaces now, right? It's not just a camera, a TV. There's much more into a space, right? Maybe it's a temperature control, right? A thermostat. Maybe it's a noisy room. Maybe there's air quality issues, or maybe it's just a bad display. All of these things affect how your rooms are utilized, right? So when we look at occupancy, there's all different ways to count occupancy. We start with some basic just trend data, right? And then we can start graphing that into a more universal, more global approach. And then we can start looking at room activity hour by hour. All of these things help you understand how your room is, when your room is being occupied. But that's just one part of it. But that's not utilization. That's just occupancy. So occupancy is how many people are in a room, but capacity is how many people is it designed to hold. The behavior is how many people use that space and the technology in it. And then last, the time. When is that meeting room being used? How often is it being used? All of those affect and control what utilization is. For an example, a boardroom of 12 people may be booked all day, but only by 2 people. That is not a well-utilized room. It's an occupied room, but it's not well utilized. So let's look at environmental data. So we start off with some basic air quality, right? Now, air quality has been a new kind of phenomenon in the meeting space arena. There's been research that is done on CO2 levels, temperature, and everything else. So poor air quality can mean that people are falling asleep, less productive. It's kind of nice it's cold in here, right? Kind of keeps it a little bit more awake. Or if it's really warm, you'd be more likely to fall asleep. Or my monotone voice maybe put you to sleep too, one of those. But there's more to it than just that. Are you using your room effectively? Are you keeping everything powered on, fully powered on when it's not being in use? And are you unplugging your devices during the evenings? Are you putting them to low power state? Are you using some automation to power them back on or power things off when they're not needed? A lot of devices put things into sleep modes and everything else, but there's other components, HVAC systems, lighting, drapery, right? All those come into play. Whether your room faces south or west or east or north affects all of these things in your room. So you need to understand how those play into your room configurations.
Okay, let's finish off our little survey before we continue with collaborative intelligence. How many of you have historical reporting that enables KPI tracking and trend analysis of device and collaboration meeting space health and functionality for all of your spaces? Anyone? Okay, loaded question.
Yeah.
How many of you have real-time and historical room capacity and utilization visibility for all of your spaces? Anyone? All right, that was number 10. Bonus question number 11. How many of you are providing any reporting of any kind into the C-suite of your organization? We got one. All right. So a common problem is data silos. IT, AV, and facilities each track data, but often from entirely different systems. IT likes to look at device health, support tickets, and network status. AV teams look at equipment usage, room technology health, display and audio data. Facilities is looking at booking systems, occupancy sensors, HVAC, and energy usage. Another term that came out of COVID is workplace experience. Workplace experience teams are often just IT, AV, and facilities teams coming together to ensure everything is not only working, but working in the best possible way to create the most positive experience for users in all workplaces. The common challenge is often not having a single platform that provides a complete view, a unified view as to what's really going on. Where workplace experience teams have been created and where they have the ability to interpret richer data, their focus has expanded beyond just the traditional conference or meeting rooms, but to the broader office, to the whole building, to the complete campus, and even to the entire real estate portfolio. As Adam talked about, COVID ushered in new technologies and new ways to work, which changed the focus of IT, AV, and facilities to the workplace, to the employee and customer experience, and to productivity and optimization. The ultimate goal is to create and maintain flexible, productive spaces that empower every employee.
Sorry. So we manage workplace intelligence, not just room spaces, right? It's a whole ecosystem. Hybrid work has permanently changed how IT organizations work, and offices are now used by employees split time between home and office. So real estate teams have pressure to optimize their spaces, whether that is reducing budget, adding more spaces, reducing spaces, reconfiguring it. They're under pressure to maximize every dollar more than ever before, to entice people to come back into the office. So employee experience now resides on the experience they have. If they have a good experience in their office, they're going to go back to the office, or they just need to get out of the house. One of those two reasons they're going into the office. Decisions are no longer just reports. They are group work. It's workplace experience teams coming together and working as one to configure and understand how all of the spaces amongst their organization is being used. As organizations pivot from hybrid to the return to office, which a lot of us are getting back into, leaders need more headcount, and they need to make decisions on those headcounts. Now the question is, how are meeting and collaboration spaces being truly utilized? Teams had to figure out how to gather data and put that data into a single source, filter it down into a useful report that they could bring to their leadership and say, here is exactly why we need to reconfigure or reinvest in improving these spaces or changing these spaces out. It's no longer a, hey, can we go do this? They want the proof of why you need it. Once you have that, you can start getting to building. But really, you got to learn what you don't know first. Is your equipment outdated? Do you have equipment that is constantly failing? Do you have rooms that are over or underutilized? Do you have enough space for people to work? And are you moving offices or downsizing your building? If so, you need to plan for that. These are all things that take key responsibility in figuring out your places. Quite often, you're going to see people giving a report that looks like this. They're going to pick 2 rooms, maybe 3 rooms at random. These 2 rooms tell very different stories of what's going on. But that's just 2 rooms. Did you handpick those 2 rooms? Did you throw a dart? You need to build more collective data to understand how your spaces are being utilized.
The modern toolkit all boils down to data. Today and going forward, we need new ways to get and to look at data, new ways to interpret data, new ways to present data, and new ways to use that data to drive the right and the best changes. To drive action, we must clearly demonstrate how data-backed decisions elevate the workplace experience. Delivering actionable insights builds buy-in and unlocks investment. To do this most effectively requires new and more comprehensive data, which opens the door to the world of IoT and all manner of environmental sensors for data like Adam mentioned, temperature, humidity, CO2, noise, and more. AV and UC environments can generate vast amounts of operational data, but raw data by itself does not drive improvement. To optimize performance, to control spend, and to plan with confidence, organizations need clear insights from how their collaboration technology performs over time. How do you transform device and room data into meaningful intelligence? By surfacing trends, patterns, and performance metrics across your entire estate, you can help IT, AV, facilities, and workplace experience leadership teams make informed decisions backed by evidence and not assumptions. Important note here is that you must have data across your entire estate. Partial data is either at best useless or at worst dangerous, as it could lead to false, inaccurate, or misleading insights. If you analyze historical aggregated data, you can provide insight into how your collaboration technology environment performs across weeks, months, and eventually years. You gain visibility into long-term device reliability trends, usage and utilization patterns by room, space, and location, failure frequency by device type, model, and vendor, performance variations across sites or regions, growth and change across the entire estate. This estate level perspective enables you to finally get from reactive support to proactive planning, which is not only a lot more fun, but also more productive, and it delivers tremendous value. Understanding what happened yesterday is useful, but understanding what keeps happening is transformative. To do this, you need to track information to highlight trends, such as repeated failure points across similar rooms or devices, mean time between failures, time to resolution performance over time, recurring incident patterns, seasonal or usage-driven performance shifts. Identifying patterns rather than isolated events, you can address root causes and not symptoms. Analytics plays a critical role in controlling and directing spend. But to do this, you need to support evidence-based hardware replacement planning, identification of devices nearing end of life, comparison of maintenance cost versus replacement cost, vendor and model performance benchmarking, reduction of unnecessary refresh cycles. Instead of replacing equipment just based on age alone, you could plan based on actual performance and reliability. Rooms and collaboration assets are expensive. Analytics ensures that they're used effectively. To do this, you need to provide insight into room usage, frequency, and duration, underutilized or overbooked spaces, capacity planning, adoption trends for different types of spaces, and correlation between usage and support demand. These types of insights support better space planning, workplace strategy, and future investment decisions. Different stakeholders need different views of often the same data. You need to be able to deliver reporting that supports IT and AV operational reviews, facilities and workspace planning, executive and board level reporting, budget justification and forecasting, SLA and service reporting, service performance reporting. Together, clear, structured reporting ensures that collaboration, technology performance can be communicated beyond the tech teams.
So let's look at space intelligence. There's a lot of ways to format this data. This is one way that I use. I feed in a bunch of metrics from room health. I look at occupancy data, and then I go and visually inspect the spaces themselves. And I do that, or I have one person do that. I don't have a bunch of people inspecting rooms at once, because you're going to get a different value, right? So does this room have good seating, etc.? So let's look at a way to break this down. First off, we start with environmental. Let's look at environmental, right? These are things like temperature, lighting, CO2, and noise. Then we look at amenities, right? That's how comfortable are the chairs. Is it close to a break room? Is it close to where people are? Is it, is there coffee nearby? Then we have, Next we have technology, right? Can people actually do meetings in that space? Is the technology modern enough where they're not playing around for 15 minutes trying to figure out how to start a meeting? Is it easy to use? Do you have to have signs on the wall that say, here's how you use this room? All those things come into play. And then last, you get to your ideal room, right? This is where you want your spaces to be. And again, all of this stuff I feed into AI to generate, I said it, all right? This is my one AI word, into a very complicated series of questions and answers to help generate this data. So I have two rooms here, and let's start with the rooms in this environmental world, room A and room B. So room B is kind of getting near that ideal kind of look, but perhaps there's just, the room is facing west and there's no curtains, so it gets really hot, right? Maybe the air conditioner isn't working so well, right? So those could be very simple things to change or very expensive things to improve. So maybe you need to look at, is this space worthwhile or do we do it with something else? Maybe there's a lab next door that's really loud. Amenities, right? These are usually pretty low hanging fruit, like chairs, right? We've all been in conference rooms where everybody's got a different chair and you want to be the first one in that room to get the one working chair that doesn't lean all the way back. You know, is it close, right? Again, sometimes you can't fix these things. If the meeting room is not close to where everybody is, maybe that shouldn't be a meeting space. It should be something else. Let's look at technology. This is probably where 90% of the focus comes into, is the technology. It is one of the larger budget items. Unfortunately, you also need to pay attention to these other things as well. So if you look at room H here, it's really close to being an ideal room. Maybe it just needs a newer display. Display is uncalibrated, right? We've all been in rooms where displays aren't calibrated correctly. Room G maybe just needs all new hardware, right? Maybe it's still running pre-COVID HDMI cable on the table and you're using your laptop to do everything and present rather than share. So then we get to these ideal rooms that meet all of these needs. The one problem with this here is I only have, out of all 8 of these rooms, there's only 2 that people want to go use. So how do you get the rest of your rooms to fall into this space? That's where you need to be looking at, is not just the technology, but everything else that comes into play for all your meeting spaces. And that's why you have to have a global view, not a macro view of each space you have. All right, survey says.
All right, so the good news is that Adam and I got to present first, and we get it over with, and we can have fun the rest of the 2 days. The bad news is we have a lot of empty seats, and we were hoping to have a few more people to get some more insightful data from our little informal survey. One question that I thought of that I wish I would have had on it, but I'll ask it. How many of your organizations have either a team or a person with a title or a focus around workplace experience? Okay. So again, that's probably one of those that falls into that modern organization kind of category. It was interesting. Only one person said that they were with what they consider to be a modern organization. And then as you caught the drift of the questions, there was a bunch starting with the basic up down for some rooms to all rooms, and kind of built up the scale of all of the data that we were talking about. We were hoping to find something along the lines of, 30% of you thought you were in a progressive organization, but yet when it came to these specific questions about having these capabilities in all of your rooms, it was a lot less, right? With only 7 answers.
Not a statistical difference
it wasn't statistically significant, but I don't know. Adam, any other?
I think what I find is there's a lot of rooms and spaces and companies out there that are trying to get to that next step, but it is such a large jump to go from a per space, per macro view into that bigger view, whether that's tools to do monitoring or hardware in rooms or just pure people. And that always seems to be the number one driving issue of why people get stuck in this kind of middle space, right? They've done some work to get better and they need to get to the next step. But that next hurdle is from hurdle 1 to hurdle 2 is like this. hurdle 2 to hurdle 3 is this. And trying to get from those 2 points is what drives the largest budget drive, right? And the most resources you need. And when you look at how a company manages all of this, there is still very much IT and there is facilities. And IT may control the camera and the AV equipment, but they don't control the display in the room, and they don't control the furniture, or they don't control anything else. But facility says, well, we really want to be able to put hardware in there to control the lighting, control curtains, and things like that. So they go out and they make acquisitions of products, and then IT goes, these things don't work, right? So that workplace experience, a group of people who can work together, is what drives your progress forward, because they see the people, they see everything. And in our case, quite often, HR is part of that workplace experience also. They have a different view on how people collaborate together. So,
Yeah, just to tag on to that. Do any of you have people in your organization with a title or a team or a focus on employee experience? Sometimes that's works in there too. In my world, I get to interact with a lot of different types of organizations, and that spectrum from technologically conservative to technologically progressive, it's a spectrum, right? But if I had to roughly count, I probably encounter 15 to 20% that are really in that progressive camp. Sadly, 20 to 25% that are probably in that really conservative camp and can't get out of their own way, just really stuck. So much so that there's not a whole lot that can, I don't feel like there's a lot that can be done for them. And then there's the big middle of in between. And what's interesting there is half of that middle probably understands that they're trying to get to, to move along the spectrum, to move towards that progressive end. And the other half that is there happens to find themselves there almost like accidentally, right? It's by happenstance that they've got a newer office, a newer building that is more modern, that happens to have been planned well, but they've got a bunch of legacy stuff and there's no kind of determined or focused strategy to kind of move along the spectrum, right? So it's interesting, but the progressive organizations, when you see them, it's really like, wow. I mean, these are some of your biggest, fastest growing, stock prices are flying, like these are companies that are firing on all cylinders. And when you see it, it's it. Anyway.
all right. Got a little bit out here. So we'll go to questions. Anybody got questions? We may or may not have something for good questions to give away. For those who work for Logitech, they may have a couple giveaways for you all. But you got to come up with either a good question or we got to ask you a good question. You got to come up with a good answer. Really? Nobody. Nobody has questions.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
What are the reasons
It's a great question. It's easy to identify the symptoms of that type of organization, but why it exists, I'm not able to get the meeting with the CEO to ask about their kind of strategic vision and direction, right?
I mean, obviously, money
Right. Right.
or is there really that much?
I think there's probably a lack of vision, right, in terms of understanding the value that can be derived from making the investments to get to that point. And my guess is that there could be business constraints that limit where and how much they can invest in what areas, and they've got other priorities that are deemed a higher priority. Um, like I said, when I see those, oftentimes I walk away kind of feeling helpless and just thinking that, for what my company does, they're not a good prospect because they certainly need what we can do, but in order, you need to have the mindset, right? You need to have it's not just finding a solution that my company might happen to be selling. It's a vision of how can I, what, how much better could I be if I take all of the steps necessary to enable having the capability of getting all of this data to be able to then make my organization better, right? I mean, that's got to come from the top, and that's got to filter down to the organization, and it doesn't kind of appear overnight, right? It's part of a organizational DNA that, yeah,
I think I think a lot to that, going from that 25 to the next step up, is they're not getting the information they need, right? Somebody in IT is saying, this is broken, we need to fix it, goes to a director that says, okay, how much is it going to cost for me to replace this part? They go, okay, let me go get you the budget to replace this part. They go up the ladder says, okay, you can fix this one room, this one part. What they're not getting is the whole bigger vision of, are these spaces being utilized to their biggest potential, right? Right now, I know we have a problem with spaces, that we don't have enough spaces. So we're always looking at, how is each one of these things being utilized? That gets generated into something that, C-Star can understand and go, oh, okay, I understand what's going on here better. Let's figure out how we can start making these improvements and figuring out how we can get this information better. But you need to be able to convince them that all we are is in break fix mode, right? We have to get outside of break fix, and you need the tools to get you past break fix. And that, for everybody, as we all know, is the single largest jump you can make, going from, from reactive to proactive. And you need to be able to help your executive suite understand that we're just going to keep wasting money fixing broken equipment or underutilized rooms or overutilized until we understand what we have, and we're just throwing money out the door, right? Second, you put that kind of phrase in there, they'll start looking at it.
but before we get to your question, let me just add one more thing. So that middle section, right? I said oftentimes you find people that are somewhere in the middle, but they just happen to be there, and others that are there, but they know that they came from the one end and they're directionally pushing to go in the other end. One of the biggest drivers and recognitions is competitiveness, right? And the reason I asked about employee experience is organizations that have a focus around employee experience and workplace experience often are doing it because they have competitors that are kicking their ass that are doing it better, and they feel it in terms of recruitment. Like, I'm from Chicago. We got tons of law firms, right? I mean, in my own town, I've got more lawyers as neighbors and friends than probably any other profession. There aren't any lawyers, are there? But I hear about it, and you hear about jumping firms, and you hear about some of these guys are partners, but the whole experience of what coming to work is like for an associate. How easy is the technology? How empowering is the workspace to be able to do your job and grow your career, right? Some do it better than others, and those that are doing it better, their business is doing better. And those that recognize that then have a determined kind of focus on these are the things I need to do to improve, and here's where I'm going to make the investments. And then it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling thing because the more they make the investments, the more data and that they have available to reinforce the direction that they're going. And as they see that, it becomes a flywheel.
So MX4 mouse, speaker, take your pick. All right, wise choice.
Yes, that's part of what employee experience departments do. And Adam mentioned, HR, oftentimes workplace experience falls under HR. Um, I don't come from AV. I've been with Utology for a year and a half. But prior to that, I was in IT uh, and we were a managed service provider. But we recognized, 10 years ago, even pre-COVID, that selling into IT departments, right? Oftentimes they're the ones that are just wanting to protect the status quo, and they're not necessarily the ones that are going to champion new technologies. But places like HR, sales, marketing, right? People that are needing better tools, better data, better information to drive better business outcomes, those are often better areas I'm a sales guy, to sell into, to find the reasons for someone to say, hey, we need to invest in this area. Other thoughts? Questions, comments?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That is a symptom, right?
Yeah.
You find an organization that's got product owners inside their own organization, right? And that's a tell that they look at their business and their organization differently and more progressively.
It takes a different way of thinking when you start coming out of device level, right? I mean, let's face it, most of us are device level people, right? We see a device. And it is a very hard change to go from that mindset to an enterprise wide space, right? You got to be able to look at that. I mean, think about the Death Star, right? Like, do you think that on the Death Star, it's, a group of stormtroopers who only look at this part. No, there's a much bigger thing at play there on that of trying to get into it. So I got my AI and I got my Star Wars, and I'm good, right? So I think that is the end of our time. I appreciate all you coming out and being here. Please fill out a survey, and if you like me enough, maybe we'll come back again for another round of something fun. Enjoy your rest of your time here, and we'll see you tonight for sure. See you now. And if you have barbecue questions, find me. Thank you.
Thank you.